But if you're close enough, cutting those extra few kilos and just trying to push the limits a wee bit more, I don't think is a benefit for people at all. And I always see that with people, they want to cut a lot more weight, thinking that it's going to give this perceived advantage, but it doesn't. It doesn't really work that way. So that's a big one, yeah.
He's wearing a t-shirt that says never made.
I believe him. I think he's telling the truth.
I never made weight, fam. Today we're diving into one of the most misunderstood and most important parts of MMA, nutrition. Our guest today works with UFC-level fighters, helping them fuel performance, cut weight safely, and recover at the highest level. Everyone talks about training and discipline, but nobody wins fights without the right fuel. Yannick Magee, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. How are you doing? How's everything?
Good, brother. Good.
That's
Cold.
good to hear.
Good and cold over here. Yeah.
You're in Ireland in February, I can imagine.
Man, cold, dark, wet. I'm going on holidays in 2 days. I can't wait to go to Spain for a few days to get away from the bad weather and get some sunshine. So, yeah, all
I
good.
don't blame
Something to look
you.
forward to.
How did you get into nutrition specifically for combat sports?
Well, I have a background in combat sports, so I competed myself for years. I've trained for years. I competed professionally in MMA. I've competed professionally in Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu as well. I've done a bit of Jiu-Jitsu competitions. So I was always around the sports. And then for years, I wasn't academic at all in school. Like, I dropped out of school. Over here, it's you go to fifth year in like sort of high school type thing. And you can go on and do more exams and go to college and stuff like that. I dropped out in fourth year, so a year before I was supposed to even do my exam. So worked normal jobs for a long time and just pissed about basically. But it was always training and it was always in and around fights. And then I decided I needed to get a bit of a career change, so I went back to like a technical college type thing and done it's called an adult access course. So I done a science one, got into that. And then from that, I tried to be a physiotherapist. I wanted to try and be that, but you had to do an exam and the exam was really, really hard. And I failed it. It was like a 4-hour exam. You didn't know what it was on. It was so hard. So my next choice for university or for college was nutrition. So it was only by default that I ended up going to nutrition. But then when I started doing the course, I fell in love with it. So I done a bachelor's degree in science in nutrition. And then from that, went and done other courses and different things when I finished my degree. And it just was a natural progression to go from doing that type of thing to, working it around something that I was already involved in and passionate about. So I ended up then going down the combat sports route. I done actually my dissertation in university was on combat sports, on hydration status and nutrition knowledge of MMA athletes. And then I started working then with a couple of guys just from our actual gym. And then it's just snowballed from there. So that's 10 years ago now. So yeah, it's been a wild journey. Yeah. So for now, I've probably worked with like near 500 different athletes at this stage.
Well, I know you were in MMA and then you made that transition, but you were a combat sports athlete and you made that transition, but what made you think that this is the correct way to go? What happened? Did something happen?
I just personal experience with cutting weight. I done when I was fighting. So my last MMA fight was 2011. So that's how long ago that is. And back then we didn't have the science that we have now. We didn't have Instagram wasn't really even a thing. I don't think. I think it was like Facebook and Bebo we had at the time, maybe. So we had nowhere to get information from, especially over here. I think over you guys, it's maybe you had a little bit more access, but for us, there was nothing. So it was always just like hearsay and, what maybe somebody in your gym told you how to cut weight and how to make weight and how to diet. So we didn't really have a clue. And I went through some very, very hard, serious weight cuts. I've seen other teammates of mine doing stupid stuff, like really like dangerous. When I look back now, I'm like, why were we doing that? Like there's a few times people, you thought maybe they were going to die. It was really, really rough stuff. So that was then, once I got into the nutrition stuff and I started learning a bit more, I was like, well, look, maybe I can actually help with this end of things, you know, and because I was still around the sport, I'm still training. I wasn't fighting as much, but I was still training. So it just was, again, it was like a natural sort of move into combat sports. And then from the history of having bad weight cuts and seeing other people do it, I was like, look, maybe we need to do something about this and try and do this a bit of a better way. So yeah, it was just went from there then.
Can you define to us what a bad weight cut is?
Yeah, so like for me, it starts right. It starts before you even get to that fight week. You know, people are looking and say, "Oh, he must have cut a lot of water weight." You know, you see the guy there last week fainting on stage, and they're like, "Oh, he must have cut a lot of water weight." Like that's the final week, yeah. So you have like different stages of sort of the life cycle or the different stages of the cut. You know, your diet that you're doing over the course of 8 weeks, 12 weeks, that for me, that has a knock-on effect on what happens on fight week. What you do in fight week has a knock-on effect on what you do in the water cut the day before the fight or the day of the weigh-ins, or sorry, the day before the weigh-ins or on the day of the weigh-ins. So it all sort of ties in together. So it's not essentially just, you know, I cut too much in the sauna, or I had too much water to cut, or I overheated in the sauna and I fainted. It's like what I've done in camp. If I've been starving myself in camp, if I have restricted my carbohydrates, if my calories have been really, really low, if I'm coming into that fight week massively depleted, and then I'm trying to take more off in fight week, then that has a knock-on effect on the water cut, and it all sort of ties in together. So for me, it's the whole lot. Do you know what I mean? It's the whole
Yeah.
journey. That's the bad weight cut. You know, it's obviously you have like, you know, people cutting a lot of water weight, which is very, very dangerous and all of these things. But it's what you're doing in the fight camp. It's what you're doing in the fight week. And then that all adds up. And then that impacts what happens in the final cut. So yeah, for me, that's where it is. If they're depleting themselves, just restricting so much, their weight has shot away up outside of fights, and then they have to starve themselves to get their weight away down. That's going to have a knock-on effect on how you come into that fight week, I think.
And what is the perfect time frame for a weight cut? I've talked to fighters that are fighting in a month and they haven't started.
Yeah.
What do you suggest is the correct time to start cutting weight if you have a fight?
So for me, it's very individual. It really depends on where you're at. You know, it depends on kind of like how much above your weight class that you are, you know, and then how much you need to get down. So it's very individual to the person. You can't really say like, oh, right, 4 weeks is enough, 8 weeks is enough, 12 weeks. It really depends on like how much they have to get off in that time frame. So if they're chronically dieting to get their body weight lower, like, are they in a position where they can do that over 6 weeks and they don't have to, you know, diet so hard? You know, they're losing maybe 1% of their body weight per week. That's
Yeah.
fine. They can do that in 6 weeks. If they have 6 weeks period of time, but they have to now cut 2% of their body weight per week, well, then maybe that 6 weeks isn't suitable. So then maybe you need to do an 8 week or 12 week. You know, so it is very individual to like kind of where they're at, and I think it boils down to how much away from their weight class they are, and then how much they have to diet down. That sort of dictates the time frame.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know that doesn't really give you like a time frame.
I get it.
Yeah. So
It just depends on who the guy is and how heavy he is, right? Because
pretty much.
sometimes you get people that cut a lot for their weight class, and sometimes you get people they fight at 185 and they walk around at 200.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, what do you think is a good like? Okay, let's say you fight at lightweight 155. What do you think that guy should be walking around at max?
And so I think like outside of fight camp, I just done it there on the calculator because we're all in kilos over here.
Yeah. No, I understand kilos. It's not kilos.
So like about 15%, 15 to 16% above your weight class. If you want to fight actively, if you want to be ready, you know, when you do maybe you diet for maybe 5, 6 weeks, you know, that's a good thing. So if you're at 155, you know, you're maybe walking around 178, 180, like that. And you could,
Yannick, does it always have to be so intense at the end? You know, at the end, right? When they're shutting off the water weight. Does it always have to be that intense?
I think And that's down to poor preparation. If somebody's focusing so much on that end of things, that last cut, that's because they've come in so heavy, and they haven't dieted down to a sensible sort of percentage above their weight class on fight week. So they're coming in maybe 12% above, 10% above. So if somebody's coming in 8% above, they've done everything they need to do in a fight camp. They haven't depleted themselves. I always say this thing about your buckets. So you have these buckets within your body, or pockets within your body. If they're not full, it's going to be a lot harder for you on fight week. But if you're going in there with your carbohydrates full, lots of fiber in your habitual diet, lots of sodium, lots of fluid, you've done heat acclimation, you've done all these things that you need to do, your calories aren't through the floor, you're feeling sort of relatively good throughout fight camp, that last cut's going to be easy. Not easy, it's always going to be a wee bit shit, but it's going to be easier. But if you're coming in there and all those buckets are half empty, or some of them are empty, then you're relying so much on the water, and then that's where it becomes a hard cut. So it doesn't always have to be a hard cut. It really depends on how prepared you are leading into that. But on the other side of that, it depends on kind of some people's mentality is cut more because they feel there's a perceived advantage to cutting more. And, then they end up focusing so much more on the water cut. So it's going to be hard regardless, so
That
yeah.
makes sense. Yannick, a lot of times the commentators have mentioned how poor hydration makes you more prone to being knocked out. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Why that is?
Well, it's due to the cushioning within the brain. A lot of the basically protective area that stops your brain from moving around too much and from bouncing off the sides. Basically, when you get hit, there's a lot of fluid there that acts as essentially a shock absorber. So if that's drained, you're going to feel the impact's going to be a lot higher. I've actually had people say to me that when they were rehydrating previously, and then when they done it, sort of it's not just my way, but the right way, kind of, I suppose, that they felt in the fights that they could actually take the shots a lot more. That they had been getting hit in previous fights and they were getting a shock from that. But when they actually rehydrated better, they were actually able to take a shot and walk through shots. So it definitely has a big impact. The more water you cut, the harder it is going to be to put back in, and the more susceptible you are going to be to that. And you're going to feel the shots a lot more as well. So yeah, it's just down to the protective cushioning around the brain.
That makes sense. Yannick, do they allow IV rehydration?
Some places, yeah. Some places. UFC doesn't. Definitely not.
Why is that?
I don't know. I don't actually know why they stopped it. Maybe because it couldn't really be controlled. Not actually too sure why they banned it. I think there was kind of like it might have been, I could be making this up, but it might have been that a lot of fighters were then relying so much on cutting a lot of water weight and feeling that they could replenish that with an IV. So it was maybe sort of encouraging people to cut maybe more weight. And maybe it was seen sort of as a way of kind of cheating a little bit. You can rehydrate really well with the IV, just cutting more weight and rehydrate with the IV. I'm not actually too sure why they actually banned it. But it's not any better than drinking the normal drinks. So if you have proper oral rehydration shakes, they're going to be easier to control. You know what you're putting in them. You can control the rate of rehydration. You're actually not going to feel as thirsty after a weight cut. That first drop of water is like heaven for some people. So if you're going on IV and you're not drinking, you're still going to have that thirst sensation. You're not going to it's not really going to shut that down as much initially anyway. So yeah, I think the drinks are far better. Definitely far, far better. Some shows still do it. I had a guy fighting in Thailand on RWS, and his opponent, just the weekend, his opponent rehydrated with IV, so some places
I
do
guess
that.
it would make sense, right? Rehydrating with IV. It'll be much easier.
But it's not better. This is the thing. If you look at the research, it's not better than using an oral rehydration shake. So yeah, so the oral rehydration shake actually rehydrates you just as well, or maybe even better than the IV. Plus, there's the benefits of how much you're drinking, how much fluid you're getting
Yeah,
back in. You can control the concentration of the drinks. You
yeah.
control the rate at which it's going in. So, and then sometimes the IVs, some people are, I have guys in Dubai and they're like, oh, should I do the IV? You know, we have somebody coming into the gym to do an IV after the weight cuts, but they're like vitamin drip IVs and they don't even have the proper amount of sodium and all of the things that they need to get back in, you know? So
Yeah.
in my opinion, and I've spoken about this to like hydration experts in research and their opinion, and based off the research, the actual rehydration or rehydration drinks are far better than the IV. So it's a misconception that people think the IV is better. It's actually not.
It just looks like it's better because it's more like legitimate, you know?
Yeah, that's more medical. Yeah.
Yeah. It looks more medical.
This is a
Exactly.
procedure. Yeah, this is bound to be better. There's a needle in your arm. Yeah.
So before a fight, when the fighters weigh in, obviously you see they're like depleted, like damn near dying. A couple weeks ago, we saw somebody faint on stage.
Yeah.
Wellmaker, I believe. Yeah, we saw him faint on stage, and then after they weigh in, they get a chance to rehydrate and eat and stuff. How does that look? Right after they weigh in, what are they eating to? What are they drinking to rehydrate? What are they eating? What should they not be eating?
Yeah, so it depends. You know, I've been at shows a lot where I've been working with fighters, you know, in person at the show, and I've been controlling their drinks and controlling their food. And I've looked around the room. A lot of times you go to these events in the weigh-ins or maybe at a hotel or something, and they have the breakfast buffet ready for all the fighters. And I've been watching, you know, what people are eating and what people are doing. And sometimes you see people just taking as much food as they can get and just eating as much as they can do because obviously they're so hungry and so thirsty and they're drinking a lot. That's not what you want to do. You know, it's not about getting in as much as you can, as quickly as you can. It's about getting it in at the right rate and the right amounts and the right stuff. You know, if you're and any fighter that will tell you this themselves, they'll know like once if they come off the scales and they drink too much or they eat too much, they'll either be sick, they'll feel bloated, they just feel really lethargic, they'll just feel very fatigued, and they don't feel good going into the fight. They don't recover properly. But if you get them to do it like sort of stepwise and just gradually reintroduce things, they feel so much better. Generally, the way, and again, it depends on what they have done to make the weight. You know, if somebody's not cut a lot of weight, a lot of water weight, they're fine. They can kind of get away with doing what they want to do. Like I had a guy today, just off topic, well, not off topic, but he messaged me and asked me, you know, just a bit of advice on Instagram. He didn't cut any weight for his fight. He's like, should I worry about this or that after the weigh-ins? And I was like, well, you didn't cut any weight, so you can just go on as normal. So how much you cut and what you cut will dictate what you need to put back in. But generally, the way I would do it, say for talk's sake, a day before weigh-in, UFC, PFL, whatever it is, um, start, and I've cut a significant amount of weight. Start with your oral rehydration shakes first. So essentially, they're just a mixture of fluids like carbohydrates, water, some carbohydrates. Generally, I look for like it's a 3% solution, it's called, of carbohydrates and then some sodium. So there's a concentration that you would put together. So for me, usually I would have a liter of fluid with about 30 grams of carbohydrates in it and about 1200 mgs of sodium, and that's their oral rehydration shake. And how many of them you have will depend on how much water they've cut. And the way I do it, I basically start gradually reintroducing the water at the start, maybe give them 60 minutes, a bit longer if they've cut a little bit more water weight, just to get the fluids back in. They're already getting the carbohydrates from the drinks, and that's starting to replenish their glycogen stores. It's starting to replenish their hydration, and then we start them on small, like high GI, so basically easy digestible carbohydrates. So think pancakes with maybe maple syrup or honey, things like this. So those really small, easy digestible snacks, and just gradually build up. So the way I think about it is like slow and steady. You know, it's not about
Yeah.
getting as much in as you can. It's about slow and steady. And with the drinks, you don't want to really drink too much more than a liter per hour. If you drink more than that, your body can't really process it. So you think if you think of it like a funnel, if you're
Yeah.
constantly pouring fluid in the funnel will back up and maybe overflow. So if you gradually drip feed that in, it's going to get into the system quicker. So it's the same when you're putting the fluid back in. You need to just gradually drip feed that in, and the same with the food. And then once a few hours have passed, then you can sort of start to increase it a little bit and add in bigger meals. So yeah,
That makes
that's
sense.
a sort of basic rundown. Now, how much you have, what you have, the time,
Yeah.
and all of that is very, very personal and dependent.
That's amazing. That's an insight that we have not received before on this show yet. So that's great. Yannick, give me one myth about MMA nutrition.
You know what? We
A myth
actually
you busted.
we have a client podcast that we put out to all our fighters that are on with us, and we done myths and misconceptions about 2 weeks ago. And now I can't remember any of them. I'm trying to think of a good one.
A myth or a misconception. Something that the general public might think, but is not true. Just like how you said, oral IV is better than intravenous.
That's definitely one, yeah. Like there's so many that maybe people know, and it's been highlighted a lot. I suppose carbohydrates is well, there's also as well cutting more weight is I suppose this is a good one. People always think that cutting more weight is much more beneficial for you. They think the more weight you can cut, the better you're going to be coming into the fight. Where I feel that it's actually the opposite. You need to cut an appropriate amount that you're not going to be obviously, miss. You're not going to be outsized basically by your opponent. If your opponent's cutting a lot of weight and you're cutting a small amount, there's going to be potentially a little bit of a benefit for them because they're a slight bit bigger. But even if you look at the research around even the UFC PI have put out, they don't see a benefit to having a lot more weight, cutting a lot more weight and regaining a lot more weight. So there's no real difference between winners and losers with that. There might be in terms of like grappling and things like that. But generally, if you look at it, like cutting more weight doesn't actually equal a performance benefit or a benefit at all. So I think that's a big misconception that people have, that they need to cut a lot of weight and they need to, such and such cut so much weight. I need to do that as well. I think the more weight you cut, the more risk there actually is towards your performance.
Sure.
I would prefer somebody to cut less weight, go into the fight fresher and more recovered than maybe have a 2 kilo weight advantage over somebody, or a few 5, 6, 7, 8 pounds, whatever it is. I think being fresh, there's a lot to be said for being fresh. Obviously, if you're not massively outsized at the weight class, then, if you're massively outsized, that comes into play. But if you're close enough, cutting those extra few kilos and just trying to push the limits a wee bit more, I don't think is a benefit for people at all. And I always see that with people. They want to cut a lot more weight, thinking that it's going to give this perceived advantage, but it doesn't. It doesn't really work that way. So that's a big one, yeah.
Interesting. Yannick, thank you so much for doing this show. We've never had a nutritionist that works so closely to the MMA game as you. We actually have never had a nutritionist on, so this episode was necessary. I think it was one of the most educational episodes we've had. Is there anything you want to leave the fans with? No.
If anybody wants to reach out for help, just drop me a message on Instagram, I suppose. Yeah, there's nothing really.
All right. Well, thank you so much for doing the show, Yannick. I really appreciate your time.
No worries.
Guys, thank you for watching the largest podcast in the world, Never Made Weight. This was Yannick Magee. If you want to follow him on Instagram, it's Yannick. That's YANNICK_Magee, MAGEE_nutrition. Thank you so much, Yannick. You have a great day, my friend.
Hey, brother. Good to chat to you. Talk to you soon.
Wearing a t-shirt that says never made.
I believe him. I think he's telling the truth.